A few summers ago, I was on a fishing trip with my friend Lucas. We had rented a small motorboat and planned to spend the weekend out on the water. The lake was enormous and surrounded by thick woods. It was peaceful during the day, but by night it felt eerily isolated. On the second evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, we spotted something unusual. About 50 yards away, a larger boat sat motionless in the water. It looked old, with peeling paint and rusted railings. There was no movement, no lights, nothing to suggest anyone was on board. Lucas and I debated whether to check it out, and curiosity eventually won. We pulled up alongside it, calling out, "Hello? Anyone here?" No answer. We climbed aboard, cautiously exploring. The boat was completely deserted, yet it didn't feel abandoned. There were personal belongings scattered around, a jacket draped over a chair, an unopened can of soda, and fishing gear. It was as if the crew had just vanished. As we searched, Lucas found a notebook on a small table. He flipped through it, but most of the pages were water-damaged and illegible. The last few entries were readable, though. They mentioned strange noises at night, shadows moving across the water, and the sense of being watched. The final entry was only 3 words: "It's not safe." We didn't stick around after that. Something about the silence and the cryptic warning felt off. We returned to our boat and motored a good distance away before dropping anchor for the night. As we settled in, neither of us could shake the feeling that we weren't alone on the lake. Around midnight, we heard a faint knocking sound coming from the direction of the abandoned boat. It grew louder, more frantic, until it stopped abruptly. Lucas wanted to go back and investigate, but I insisted we stay put. Something about that sound felt wrong, like it wasn't meant for us to hear. The next morning, we decided to head back to the marina early. As we passed the spot where the abandoned boat had been, we noticed it was gone. There was no sign of it anywhere. The lake was still and quiet, but the absence of that vessel felt unsettling. Halfway back to the marina, Lucas spotted something floating in the water. It was a life jacket. As we got closer, we realized it matched the one we'd seen on the abandoned boat. The jacket was torn, as if it had been clawed at, and there were deep scratches on the fabric. Neither of us said anything, but the tension was thick. When we finally docked, Lucas wanted to report the abandoned boat and the strange occurrences to the local authorities. The marina staff, however, acted like they'd heard it all before. One of the older attendants gave us a grim look and said, "You're lucky you didn't stay. That boat's been showing up on this lake for years. No one who boards it ever comes back the same." I asked him what he meant, and he told us a story about a group of fishermen who disappeared decades ago. Their boat was found adrift with no signs of struggle, but ever since then, sightings of the abandoned vessel had been reported. Each time someone got too curious, they'd either vanish or leave the lake claiming they were being followed. Lucas and I left without another word. That was the last fishing trip I ever went on. Even now I sometimes hear faint knocking sounds when I'm near water, like whatever was on that boat hasn't quite let go of me. Some places and some things are better left alone. It happened last summer, during a weekend getaway to the coast with my cousin Josh. We'd rented a small fishing boat to explore the bay and get away from the noise of the city. The water was calm, and there wasn't much traffic, which made the entire place feel peaceful. But that changed as the day wore on. Late in the afternoon, as we drifted near a cove, we spotted a boat in the distance. It was small, similar to ours, but something about it caught our attention. It wasn't moving, and its paint was faded and chipped. From where we were, it didn't look like anyone was aboard. Josh, ever the curious one, insisted we check it out. We pulled up alongside it, tied our boat to its rail, and climbed aboard. The boat was eerily quiet, and the interior felt off. There were no personal belongings, no cooler, no fishing gear, no signs of recent activity. It was just empty. What made it stranger were the scratches on the deck and the faint smell of something metallic. Josh tried to brush it off, saying the boat was probably abandoned after mechanical issues, but I wasn't so sure. Still, we couldn't find anything alarming, so we untied our boat and left. That night, as we anchored in the bay, the uneasiness stayed with me. I felt like we were being watched, though the water around us was empty. Just after midnight, we heard a faint splashing sound. It wasn't loud, but it was steady, like something or someone was swimming near us. We shone a flashlight into the water but saw nothing. Then, in the distance, I thought I saw the abandoned boat. It was barely visible in the moonlight, drifting closer, though I couldn't be sure. When I pointed it out to Josh, he dismissed it, saying I was imagining things. But I knew it was real. And the next morning, the mood between us was tense. I didn't sleep much after spotting the boat, and I could tell Josh hadn't either, even though he didn't admit it. We decided to head back to shore early. As we motored through the bay, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see that boat again. For a while, there was nothing, just calm water and the rising sun. Then we saw it. The same boat was drifting aimlessly ahead of us. It shouldn't have been possible. We'd left it far behind the previous day. Josh slowed down as we approached. This time, it wasn't empty. There was someone, or something, sitting on the deck, facing away from us. They didn't move as we got closer, and for a second, I thought it might be a mannequin or some kind of prank. But then its head turned slightly, just enough to let us know it was aware of us. Josh cut the engine, and we sat there, frozen, staring at the figure. It didn't make a sound, didn't move further, just sat there as if waiting. My gut told me to leave, to not get any closer, but Josh, in his usual impulsive way, yelled, "Hey, are you okay?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, the boat began to drift backward, as though pulled by an invisible force. It glided smoothly, faster than the current should have allowed. In a matter of moments, it disappeared into the fog rolling in from the cove. We didn't talk the entire ride back to the marina. When we docked, I noticed Josh kept looking over his shoulder, almost as if expecting to see the boat again. As we packed up, an older fisherman approached us. He must have noticed how shaken we looked, because he asked if we'd seen something unusual. We told him about the boat, and his expression darkened. "You're lucky you didn't get on it again," he said. "That boat's been drifting these waters for years. No one knows where it came from, but every time someone boards it, they bring back something worse than just a story." When I asked what he meant, he just shook his head and walked away. I haven't been on the water since. Josh moved to another state a few months later, and we barely talk anymore, but every now and then I'll get a text from him late at night. They're short and cryptic, just messages like, "Do you ever feel like it's still out there?" Or, "I saw it again." And every time I read them, I wonder if the boat is drifting toward me, too. It started on a weekend fishing trip with my friend Ethan. We rented a small boat to explore the vast, quiet lake outside of town. The area was secluded. No crowds, no noise, just us and the water. It was supposed to be the perfect escape. We'd been on the lake for hours when we noticed a strange silhouette in the distance. As we drew closer, we realized it was a boat. An old, weathered one, much larger than ours. It looked completely abandoned, drifting aimlessly. No signs of movement, no sound, nothing. Ethan, ever the adventurous one, suggested we check it out. Reluctantly, I agreed. We tied our boat to its side and climbed aboard. The deck was empty and the atmosphere felt wrong. Ethan made light of it, joking about finding treasure, but I couldn't shake the unease settling in my chest. Inside the cabin, we found signs that someone had been there recently. An empty coffee cup, a tattered jacket hanging on a hook, but there was no one aboard. We searched the entire vessel and found nothing. No supplies, no logs, no explanation for its abandonment. Ethan suggested we take the jacket as a souvenir, but I stopped him. Something about the boat felt like it shouldn't be disturbed. We left quickly, returning to our boat and putting as much distance as we could between us and the derelict vessel. But that night, back at the lakeside cabin, I couldn't stop thinking about it. As I lay in bed, I thought I heard faint splashing outside. I told myself it was just the water, but when I looked out the window, I saw something that froze me in place. The boat, the one we'd left behind, was anchored just offshore, barely visible in the moonlight. The next morning, Ethan laughed off my concerns. He said it was probably just another boat that looked similar. I wasn't convinced, but I didn't want to argue. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. We went back out on the lake later that day, and as we passed the spot where we'd first seen the boat, it wasn't there anymore. I tried to tell myself it had been towed away, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. That night, the strange sounds started again. Splashing, faint knocking, like something tapping on the side of the cabin. Ethan heard it too, but he refused to admit it was anything out of the ordinary. Things escalated on the third night. We were inside the cabin when we heard a loud thud against the side of the dock. Ethan grabbed a flashlight and stormed outside, muttering something about raccoons. I followed, reluctantly. The flashlight beam swept across the water, and there it was again. The boat, floating just a few feet from the dock. Ethan shouted at it, demanding to know who was messing with us, but there was no response, just the creak of the old vessel swaying with the current. Then, we heard something that made my stomach drop. A soft splash, like something slipping into the water. "Get back inside," I said, my voice barely steady. Ethan hesitated but eventually followed me. We locked the doors and stayed up all night, listening to the occasional sound of movement outside. By morning, the boat was gone. We packed up and left the cabin as soon as the sun rose. On the drive back to town, Ethan was unusually quiet. Finally, he spoke. "You don't think it followed us, do you?" I didn't answer, but his question haunted me all. A week later, I got a call from Ethan in the middle of the night. He sounded terrified, whispering about hearing noises outside his apartment. "It's the boat," he said. "I swear it's here." I tried to calm him down, but the line went dead. I haven't heard from Ethan since. When I went to his apartment the next day, it was empty. His car was gone, and the neighbors said they hadn't seen him in days. I don't know what happened to Ethan, but sometimes late at night, I think I hear faint splashing outside my own window. I haven't gone near the water since. and I never will again.